Us tonight. Last week we solicited questions from the community, and we have those that we'll get to in just a second. But just before we start, I wanted to establish a couple norms for the meeting and then introduce our team, and then we will go from there. So again, Eric Knuth, thank you so much for coming out. I'm the superintendent at Skinny Atlas Central School District. For those of you that attended our last board meeting, Mr. Pell was kind enough to start in a similar fashion. There's a lot of emotion, and there's a lot of vitriol, and a lot of conflicting information floating around about a lot of different aspects of COVID-19 and school responses. So tonight there are some things that we will do, and there's some things that we won't do. We will answer the questions that were solicited from the community. We will introduce our entire team. You'll hear from all of our team members briefly, with just brief updates, and then there'll be some opportunity to ask us a few questions at the end, time permitting. What we won't do is debate the efficacy of mask wearing. We're not going to debate the efficacy of vaccines. For those of you who may not know, our governor, our brand new governor, as of 12:01 this morning, Kathy Hochul, announced that there's a statewide mandatory mask mandate in schools. So this is now a state level decision. This is a state level directive. And those are conversations that we're not going to engage in tonight. So with that, I just want to introduce my entire team, and I will start over here. If you could just come up and introduce yourself real quick, and we'll go from there.
Got a little new floor here that wasn't there before. Hi, I'm Pat Brown, and I am the K-2 principal here at Waterman, and I welcome everybody tonight. So thank you for coming, everybody.
I'm Mike Caraccio, the middle school principal. Welcome, everybody.
Connor Brown, school business manager. Welcome, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Greg Santoro, high school principal.
Hello, everyone. John Lawrence, the principal at State Street, grades 3, 4, and 5.
Heather Buck, I'm the coordinator for instructional technology and the fine arts.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Whipple, director of learning.
Good evening, I'm Francine Brunel, K-12 Humanities Curriculum Coordinator.
Thank you, Francine. And over here.
Good evening, I'm Kristen Moses, and I'm the coordinator of Student Support Services and Family Engagement. Welcome.
Hello everyone, Steve Musso, Director of Student Wellness Activities and Athletics.
I'm Brian Cohen, K-12 STEM Coordinator.
All right, thank you very much. And then Mike Major.
Mike Major, Assistant Principal High School.
Thanks, Mike. So now that everybody's introduced, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask Mrs. Moses to sort of MC the questions as we proceed through. And we will do our best to answer each of these as a team. Some I'll answer, some I'll defer to my colleagues up front here. So thanks, Mrs. Moses.
You're welcome. Okay, so what we did was we took all the questions and we kind of grouped them into different categories because some of them are very similar. So the first question that was asked by several people was, will masks be mandatory? And as you can see, from Mr. Knuth's earlier response, yes, they will be mandatory for all students and staff while indoors at this current time, and students will be offered mask breaks and be permitted to remove masks whenever outdoors.
Thanks, Mrs. Moses. So really, the mandate is masks at all times while indoors. It's as simple as that. If you're indoors, you have masks on. Once you leave, once you go outdoors, masks will be removed. We're doing everything we can to create as many of those opportunities as we can throughout the day for recreation, activities, kids eating lunch, even classroom instruction where appropriate, to have kids outdoors with as much frequency as possible, weather permitting.
Okay. Another question was, will you follow the recommendations of the Department of Health, upstate physicians, and mandate masks for everyone in school, and when possible, vaccination?
So once again, as we'd said during the board meeting, that these are the sources that we considered for the decision that we made as a district and publicized on Tuesday. And this PowerPoint was actually created a few hours before Kathy Hochul's announcement that came in at just 3 o'clock today. So yes, masks are mandated.
Another mask question. Why will our children be forced to wear masks when there is absolutely zero scientific evidence or data proving it would be preventative at an elementary age or effective at slowing the spread of COVID?
So once again, we're not going to debate the efficacy of mask wearing or vaccines in schools. These are questions that were submitted verbatim by parents in the community, so we wanted to share all of this. But at the same time, again, we're not going to get into the debate over whether or not they work. Our goal as a school district, and I said this on Tuesday, is twofold: student safety and in-person instruction. Everything that we do is connected to relationships, connections, and learning. And for anybody that experienced virtual instruction last year, as wonderful as our teachers are and as hard as they worked, it will never and can never be as effective as in-person instruction. You cannot connect with kids over a Zoom 2-inch square the same way you can in person. So everything that we do, all of our decisions, everything that we've decided in preparation for opening this year has been directly related to student safety and preserving our ability to provide in-person instruction for all of our kids every day.
Okay, another mask question. Would students not have to quarantine if exposed if they are wearing masks?
So quarantine is difficult. So last year, if you recall, we have residents that exist in both Onondaga and Cayuga counties. And you could have 2 kids in the same classroom with 2 different quarantine orders coming from 2 different sets of directives from 2 different health departments. The Onondaga County Health Department has already published their document about how those decisions will be made. We'll share that with the community tomorrow. And we are still waiting for the official document from Cayuga County. This is what we know. Quarantine orders are being determined based on physical proximity, time in physical proximity, whether or not students were wearing masks or not, and then vaccination status. These are the 4 factors that most of these decisions are made. And I want to be 100% clear as well, is that the school district's responsibility in all of this is to provide the county health departments with information. The school district does not place students into quarantine. The way this would work is I would call Mr. Lawrence and I would say, the county health department made me aware that we had a COVID-19 positive student. We would identify the student. Mr. Lawrence would consult the seating chart in all of the classes that day to identify who is at risk. Obviously, the rules differ as well between secondary school kids ages 12 and under, many of whom are already vaccinated, and then our under 12 population, none of whom are vaccinated. And then the county health department takes that information, they go and make the individual phone calls to the individual families, and they make the determination based on who is going to be placed into quarantine. They make us aware of those decisions, and then we work with the families to figure out what the best course of action is to support each of the kids affected.
Can our children be unmasked while sitting in their seats for instruction? We worry while they are so young and have been masked the entire time at Waterman that the masks interfere with critical learning needs. For example, being able to see faces and mouths is important for social development, language learning, and even speech therapy, which our son has been in for years now. Can they please be unmasked at their desk if they are 3 feet apart? Please.
So the answer is not initially. These are the directives that we have right now. The state and the counties will constantly review this information, and when they change and when they lighten restrictions, we will adapt accordingly. With regard to students that are in speech and language, we've tried to adapt to some of these needs with different products that are offered. We have see-through masks, clear masks, face shields, other options so that those kids don't miss out on the benefit of actually, it's difficult, extremely difficult to teach speech and language when a child can't see a moving mouth and mimic those movements. So we have a lot of that already in the works and those products purchased and they're ready for deployment. But again, when you're indoors right now, masks are on. When you're outdoors, masks can be removed.
If we start the year in masks, what number of cases for our county do we have to be under to remove the mask?
So that's a good question. This is going to be data-driven decisions, but again, we're working with 2 different counties. There's school districts in our region that work with 4 different counties. Each county has within their rights to make these determinations based on the data that they want to review. The mask mandate that came through the governor's office today is a game changer because it requires all counties to act the same way. Frankly, this is what should have happened last year when masks were first used, and that game of telephone between what one county was doing and the other county, and the inconsistency caused a lot of turmoil for our families, it caused a lot of disruption for our kids and learning, and a lot of confusion and anger in the community because the different rules applied to kids in the same circumstances, and that clearly is frustrating.
Do masks prevent transmission of COVID in the classroom?
So what we know about masks, again, we're not going to debate the efficacy of masks, but what we do know is that they were one factor that we could control in mitigating how many students are exposed to quarantine.
How will you have kids do PE and not breathe in CO2 while exercising in a mask?
I'm going to turn this over to Steve Musso. Thanks, Steve.
So, as with the other answers, we follow the guidelines and recommendations. Obviously, it's state mandated now at this point. We did not have any issues of any students with anything to do with hypercapnia and masks. According to the research, the CO2 particles are so small they can easily move through the mask, whereas the droplets that hold the virus are stopped by the mask. So that's according to the research that's available. As we did last year, we will have mask breaks indoors, and outdoors they do not have to wear masks.
Thanks, Steve. The other thing, too, is we're committed to doing mask breaks throughout the day. Our teachers know our kids best, and while we're trying to be as consistent as possible, our teachers know when a kid needs a break. Our teachers know when it's a good time for a kid to take a break, and that's something that we're going to encourage throughout the year as well.
Which sort of goes right into this question. What do I do if my child cannot tolerate a mask?
Yeah, so if your child absolutely cannot tolerate a mask, what we ask you to do is to consult your individual school principal. Do any of the principals want to weigh in on any conversations that they've had like this, or has this not been an issue? No reports, okay. So really, if there are mitigating circumstances or things that are specific to individual students, as with any sort of health concern, reach out to us, let us know what's going on. If we need to facilitate extra mask breaks or provide any other flexibility, there's a lot of different things that we can do, and we're more than willing to work with you. So please reach out.
That leads us to some vaccination questions. I know with HIPAA laws, you can't divulge medical information regarding staff. However, as children under 12 cannot be vaccinated, it's important to me that my child's teacher is vaccinated before starting the school year. Is there any way to confirm that the teachers that will be in direct contact with my child are fully vaccinated?
So with HIPAA laws, this is confidential health information, and while we cannot share with individual parents who is and who is not vaccinated, the other thing that Kathy Hochul had announced today is that there's going to be, and Ryan McMahon had announced it last week, was that there are mandatory vaccinations for all K-12 personnel. And if individuals are unwilling to get vaccinated, they have to submit to weekly testing. So Onondaga County is working with us to set up what this process looks like. It's still not clear for how they're going to accomplish this. Initially, it was going to be put on the individual staff member, but we're trying to facilitate this in a way to make sure that the people that are in front of your kids are safe, that they're safe in some cases from the kids, depending on their unique health circumstances. But it's the law of the land at this point right now that masks are required while indoors in schools. Vaccinations are required for all K-12 staff. And then the other thing that happened yesterday was the Pfizer vaccine was given full FDA approval. And that has paved the way for more widespread vaccination mandates that are happening, not just in schools, but in private industry as well.
Will you require weekly testing for unvaccinated staff and students at the high school?
So right now, weekly testing is required for any unvaccinated school faculty or staff member. There is no current requirement for student testing.
A social distancing, cohort bus, and other COVID plan question. Will students be able to sit together in the lunchroom again?
I'll let our elementary principals handle this one. John?
Can I answer for you, Pat? Same thing? So at Waterman and State Street, we are going to have lunch in the cafeterias. At tables, they will be as socially distanced as possible, but we are going to use a seating chart. If there is the fact that a quarantine is necessary, we want to make sure we know exactly where all those students are. So there'll be seating charts for K through 5 to start the school year.
Mr. Crouch, thanks.
At the middle and high school, it'll be very similar to last year. So for those of you, if there's anyone who's new in the audience, we had desks, individual desks set up in rows, all the students facing the same direction, 6 feet apart when we first started the school year, and we're back to 3 feet, so they're back a little closer. They all sit separate and face one direction and eat in the cafeteria together.
Thank you both. Anything you want to add, Mr. Santoro, for the high school? Yep. Okay, same as the high school. Again, the goal, people, is that this year should look like any other school year with masks. School with masks, that's what we're going for. Every bit of normalcy that we can inject back into our ability to meet like this as a group. Kids eating in cafeterias, playgrounds are open, it's school with masks.
My children are wondering if everything is basically back to normal, with the exception of mask wearing. Can they use the playground with all the kids from their grade?
So basically, like I said, school with masks. Playgrounds are open, consistent between all of our schools. Kids are going to not just be granted access to those things, but those are encouraged because we want them to be outdoors and have an ability during the day to be unmasked as much as possible.
Will they still be placed in cohorts and not allowed to mix? Will middle school students get to switch classes?
So the cohort model was really a product of us trying to separate groups into, what we were trying to do is mitigate exposure last year from one group to the next. After a year of doing that, we didn't experience the spread or any of the factors that really showed that to be an effective practice. Other things like walking into school buildings and getting temperatures read. Some of these things have widely been accepted as being really not that effective, so we're not going to do those things anymore. So we are not cohorting kids. Students will mix. Students will switch classes. Students can use their lockers. Students can use locker rooms.
Will there be a car line again? I liked the car line.
I think this might be the only person that told me they liked the car line. So for anybody that's had the misfortune, and me being new to this community this year, I've done it once or twice where I had the misfortune of trying to make a left out of the high school and come down this road at the wrong time of day, and you're trapped like a rat for 40 minutes or so while all the kids are getting picked up. So yeah, the car line and the dismissal procedures will be the same, K through 12. However, we're really encouraging everybody that we have buses for a reason. Put your kids on the bus, put your kids on the bus, put your kids on the bus. This will drastically, it'll be a community service if nothing else, because it will drastically cut down on the traffic that's coming out in front of Waterman. And I know that there's been some concerns and complaints of unsafe situations where kids are being let out and sort of darting across traffic. So our buses are at full capacity. It's a federal law that on public transportation, everybody is to be masked at all times. That's already in place, whether you're on a Centro bus or a school bus or anything like that. All public transportation masks are required at all times. And what that allows us to do is to put 66 kids back on a 66 passenger bus. Last year, thanks to the generosity of our parents and community and how willing everybody was to drive their kids, that really allowed us to open school and get all the kids here. But for all of you out there that have sat on that line, put your kids on the bus and we can safely and efficiently transport them.
Will there be temperature checks again?
No temperature checks anymore.
What is the sick policy for students this year, and what will warrant a COVID test, and where to take students for these tests?
So right now, if your student is out sick, it's the same as it was last year, where it's basically you need a negative COVID test or a note from a physician to return. So for example, if you remove your child from school for a dentist appointment, you obviously don't need a COVID test to return to school. Talk to our nurses, talk to our principals, we'll work with you to make sure that we're not creating any undue complications for you. But if it's for symptoms, for any symptomatic person. We've said the same to our faculty and staff, as we'll say to our parents. If there are cough and cold symptoms, if there are COVID-like symptoms, please, please, please keep your kids home. If you're an employee, please stay home until you can confirm that you are not COVID-19 positive. We have a finite amount of staff members that we can lose to quarantine or infection before school closes. If you remember all the letters that I sent out last year that constantly informed the community of how that was going, we are right now in a rate of transmission that far exceeds where we started with COVID-19 when schools had completely shut down. Right now, we are already way above that. So please, if you're symptomatic at all, consider everybody around you, and please stay home.
Will there be limited space on buses due to any social distancing?
Full capacity on buses.
How will busing run both for everyday school routes and also for our sports teams?
Same as it always did. We will run our sport buses, but again, for our coaches, for people involved with our sports programs, masks are required at all times on buses. The eating on buses is still going to be problematic. I know that was a complication that we had to try to figure out last year, and we'll work with our coaches and our teams to figure out how to safely do that, but right now that's not permitted because masks are required at all times.
Will we be able to go inside the school and get a tour on bus day?
Yes, Mr. Brown, can you talk about bus day?
Yep, so for our incoming kindergartners, of course, we love when they come in on the bus day. It's one of the best days. And I know that they're anxious to come in and see what's going on. So on bus day this year, it will be run just like a normal bus day that we've had in the past. We'll just be wearing masks. The children will go. Well, all the parents come in, they ride the bus to school, and then the children and the parents will come in and we'll go down to the classrooms. They get to go in to meet their teacher, and then the parents and I come in here and we have some conversations about some of the rules and regs and what we do and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm also able to take questions and things like that. So it's kind of a nice way to do it. Last year we just did the bus and the kids came in, but then when we got on the buses, it was, we didn't quite know, exactly what to do last year. But this year we feel much more confident in doing that. So we're excited to have the little cherubs come in and meet everybody.
Thanks, Mr. Brown.
Thank you.
Will you continue to call students over the loudspeaker to get their COVID shot?
So this was a misconception that this did not happen.
If masks are mandatory, there will be options of some virtual school days at home. Will there be some options of some virtual school days at home?
So right now, our plan is that we are not doing remote instruction. If you look at school opening plans across the community, all of the resources and personnel and work that went into creating additional sections, creating multiple different instructional options, it's unsustainable long term. So right now, school is open, it's school with masks, and we are not planning on offering remote instruction.
Is there an option for remote learning? Will it be a separate class like last year? If things get bad again or a child is quarantined, will they be able to remote into their normal in-person class like last year? Will there be social distancing?
Social distancing was reduced from 6 feet to 3 feet. With regard to remote instruction, the only time we will shift completely to remote instruction is if we're forced into a closure, and that's either due to infections, and most likely it'll be quarantine orders that will shut us down. So if we reach a critical mass of people that we don't have enough staff to properly supervise a school or a grade, or in those cases, shutdowns may be the only option. But our plan right now is to keep school open for in-person instruction all day, every day for everybody.
Culturally responsive sustaining education. What does the CRS curriculum look like?
So with culturally responsive sustaining education, as I explained at the board meeting on Tuesday, this is not a curriculum. A framework is really an instructional approach, and for us, it focuses on those things that we really value. It's about student connections, and it's about some sort of relationship between the kids and the content. Culturally responsive sustaining education is often conflated with race only, and it is not. We had a long conversation just before we came in here about special education with students' rights and access to rigorous curriculum. Mrs. Grinnell, would you speak just very briefly on the four key components?
Sure.
Thank you.
So as I worked with my colleagues across the board here, the four main principles of culturally responsive education include a welcoming and affirming environment. So we want all of our students to feel welcomed and affirmed. It's about having high expectations for all students and a rigorous instruction. And as I've worked again across with our principals and our other instructional leaders, that is continuously something we've been focusing on, as high expectations and a rigorous curriculum for our students. And then inclusive opportunities, inclusive for all students within our curriculum and our assessments. And then that's all supported, the fourth part of that is through professional learning. So I know that teachers have been engaged in a lot of different professional learning over the summer, and so for example, I worked with third through eighth grade teachers over the last few days, and we focused on that high expectation and rigor within our using complex texts and writing. So that's an example of how we're focusing on something specifically within an academic content area, and it's culturally responsive because of that high expectation and being inclusive to all students in that area. So the professional learning that we've been doing for many years that we've been engaged in is really reflective of that, and I think it's just highlighting and elevating the conversation a little bit more.
Thank you, Francine. Really, with culturally responsive, sustaining education, again, the focus is on good teaching. I had the opportunity to speak to Dr. Lester Young, who's the Chancellor of the New York State Education Department Board of Regents, and asked him a lot about it. And what he acknowledged was that this is a process that should be rolled out in accordance with how ready a community is for these things. He urged a slow rollout. He encouraged us to spend a lot of time building capacity and doing professional development for our administrators and our staff prior to any sort of changes that your kids will see in the classroom. One thing I'll say about culturally responsive education is that this is nothing new. Culturally responsive education was about selecting material that is applicable to the kids in front of you. That's it. How do you facilitate kids connecting with learning in a way that's meaningful for them? That is the 30,000-foot overview that's at the core of this thing, and it's really what we believe is learning is only done best when it's supported by positive relationships and connections.
My question is, what CRSE teachings will be practiced at what age levels? And how as a parent can we see these teachings prior to our children learning them so we can better understand what the little ones are hearing and at what grade level?
Mrs. Moses, would you actually just read right from their website about what?
Yeah, absolutely. This is right off of the second line is from the New York State website. CRSE is about good teaching and making sure all kids feel safe, connected, and have full access to all Scanny Atlas opportunities. The culturally responsive sustaining framework is intended to help education stakeholders create student-centered learning environments that affirm cultural identities, foster positive academic outcomes, develop students' abilities to connect across lines of difference, elevate historically marginalized voices, empower students as agents of social change, and contribute to individual student engagement, learning, growth, and achievement through the cultivation of critical thinking.
Thank you very much. So that's a mouthful, but really what it has to do is our job is to prepare our kids to live in the world as it is. It's a culturally and racially diverse world, and we need to do a better job of preparing our students to do that.
When was CRC implemented at SCSD?
So nothing has been implemented. There's been no curricular changes. Any curricular changes that happen will go through our curriculum committee, and that's something that we're committed to doing in conjunction with the community. So for people who are concerned, we will be reinstituting all of the committee structures that we could not do last year because we could not meet in person. All of those will continue, and for anybody who's interested, please join us on our curriculum committees, and you'll be well aware of any changes that are coming down the pipe. As far as implementation, again, this year for us is about building capacity. Our administrative team partnered with Dr. Jeffrey Mangram from Syracuse University last year We have an additional book study that our leadership team is going to engage in. We're partnering to some degree with NYU in this work, and really we're going to take this year to figure out how best to roll this out in our community in a way that's our teachers are prepared to teach your kids. So, long answer, but there are no curricular changes that you will see in the classrooms this year.
Who made the decision?
So this was enacted by the Board of Regents, our new commissioner, Betty Rosa, and Chancellor Lester Young, and this was rolled out really in a statewide collaborative process with stakeholder groups and committee meetings that went on for a long time before they rolled out the culturally responsive sustaining education framework.
When was the decision made? Did the public ever have a chance to give their input? What are the details?
So basically the decision was made to roll this out in the spring of this year. And there was quite a robust period of public comment that was enacted by the Board of Regents. There is also a misconception that there are some strict accountability measures and this is a do this or else kind of program, and it's really not. And that was a question I actually got to ask the Chancellor specifically, was about this rollout. And again, he encouraged slow, deliberate, thoughtful work involving the entire community. There is no penalty, there is no accountability measures. Teachers are not going to be evaluated or punished because they don't support this work. Like I've said a couple times now, the building capacity piece has to do with getting our entire faculty and staff prepared to even engage in this work in a meaningful way.
Will critical race theory education be mandatory education in the Skaneateles School District as demanded by the National Education Association?
So critical race theory is not something we teach at Skaneateles Central School District. Critical race theory is often conflated with culturally responsive sustaining education. They are not the same thing. Critical race theory is something that is typically taught in graduate or postgraduate level classes. It is not something that students encounter at Skaneateles Central School District.
We would like to form a committee, parents, community members, teachers, and administration, to determine how much of an issue bias is at SSD. We can then determine how to address it and incorporate that into the CRS framework.
So I don't know who submitted this statement or question, but this is excellent, and this is exactly what we want to do. When we introduced our strategic plan on Tuesday, one of the things that the strategic plan actually starts with is some sort of school climate survey or inventory. So really, the goal is to do just that. Let's gather the actual data from our community. Let's hear it from our kids' mouths. And then we can look at all this data as a community and decide where to focus.
How much money is the school district receiving from the state for implementing CRS? And what are the requirements to receive funding? Is the funding to implement CRS, or will they penalize the school district and adjust the funding in total?
So there's also a misconception out there that there's like an a la carte menu of options that we have as a school district, whereas the state has rules and regulations, and if we decide not to follow those rules and regulations, we get some sort of penalty. That's not the way it works. There is no a la carte menu. There is no funding or promise of funding connected to CRS, culturally responsive sustaining education. It is not connected to school funding in any way right now.
There are multiple reviews and audits by New York State Education Department and BOCES to ensure CRS is being implemented in a certain way. If the Skaneateles School District has a disagreement and chooses not to implement certain policies or fails an audit without correction, what happens? Is funding removed?
So again, there are no audits and there is no funding connected to CRSE. If you go through the entire document that's out online, what they do is they give you a sample implementation schedule where it's just an example. This is, again, a question I got to ask Dr. Lester Young last week was, what happens if we can't fulfill this timeline, or is this timeline a mandate or a rule? And again, what he urged over and over and over again was, we know our communities, work with our communities, and set a pace for all of this work that fits your individual community. Dr. Young is an interesting guy. He has come through the entire gamut of public education, from the classroom to administration to school superintendent, and now to college professor and chancellor of the Board of Regents. So he is keenly aware and actually gave an anecdote to us about the economic disparity within the community that he was superintendent, where you had near the Bronx in New York City, you have some of the most expensive property on planet Earth, and you also had some of the most abject poverty in the United States, only blocks away. And he is keenly aware of how different all of our communities are and how our makeup will affect how ready we are for some of this work. So again, he urged slow, deliberate, cautious action.
Did the implementation of CRS add cost to the school budget? How much?
So there's no cost changes, no administrative changes, no curriculum changes, and we don't anticipate any administrative structure changes associated with this work. Really, it has to do with professional development, professional learning, and then ultimately students and teachers interacting in an environment where teachers are keenly aware of the individual circumstances of the students in front of them. I also have to say that that's what makes this place special. Our teachers are phenomenal. They know our kids. And while culturally responsive, sustaining education is all too often conflated only with race, that is not the case here. Our teachers know our kids. They know how they learn. They know their family backgrounds. They know what their strengths, they know what their interests are. And if you are making adjustments to your curriculum to cater to your individual clientele, that's not about anything other than good teaching, and that's always been good teaching.
Will the staff or students need to go to any type of training? And if so, will it be made available to the public?
Yes, lots of professional development coming. This is something that starts with our leadership team, then goes to our faculty, and then down into the students. There is no, as I already said, there's no performance evaluations or discipline or anything connected to this work. Again, it has been conflated with critical race theory and really misinformation about the actual purpose of some of that work. So try in your minds best to separate the two. They are totally distinct and different things. And again, I'll say it, culturally responsive education is nothing new. We have been engaged in this work in public schools for years. There are certain ways of instructing kids in different communities and different environments that just work better than others. And it's about that individualization. It's about knowing the kids that are sitting in front of you and how they best learn.
Other questions. One is, what is the program Brainpop?
Heather, can you speak to Brainpop a little bit?
I'll take the easy way out. Brainpop is a program and instructional tool that we use in the buildings. It's been around in the district for about 15 years. It's a BOCES service. We purchased it through BOCES. It's short video clips that support instruction in the classroom. For example, if you teach a lesson on the Civil War, there's a Brainpop where Tim and Moby are the characters. They answer a question, then the kids have 10 quiz questions at the end. It's quick, 5 to 10 minutes. Kids use it, teachers and kids use it for review. We have a Spanish version as well as an ESL version, or ENL, or we keep changing that. And so it's used primarily, we have Brainpop Junior at Waterman, then we have regular Brainpop that's used predominantly at State Street, but also in the middle school. And then it's used a bit at the high school, a lot of times for our English language learners to confirm things and help them with things that they aren't familiar with.
Thanks, Heather. This is just one of a number of additional software resources that our teachers have access to.
So what does Brainpop teach?
It doesn't really teach anything. It supports teaching that's done in the classroom.
And what steps were taken for this program to be approved for use in our school district?
It's a BOCES. We purchased it through BOCES.
It's been in our district for over 15 years. Every school district that I've ever worked in uses Brainpop. My own children use Brainpop. It's extremely popular, short instructional vignettes.
And which teachers can use this program?
Anybody.
Anybody.
Which grade levels use Brainpop most?
I would say State Street probably uses it the most, but the middle school, there's several teachers, especially in the content areas, that use it. It's really good for science and for social studies review because it takes a big topic and narrows it down to one guiding question.
What kind of feedback from the students is used to decide if it's a good tool to use?
The kids use it a lot to review. They go back and rewatch Brainpops later because they have access to them. They enjoy it. They are happy to see Tim and Moby pop up on the screen.
Do the parents have access to this program from home to view and help discuss with students?
The students all have accounts and it's accessed through their Google accounts. So, and as long as the student's there, you can look at anything that's on it.
Anybody who assisted their child with remote instruction, I'm sure those who Tim and Moby are, and experienced some manner of Brainpop during the closures.
There is a free version that has many of the videos, but then we obviously have the paid service that has more videos included.
That leads us into what are the costs and fees for using Brainpop?
I believe it's about $2,000.
Yeah, the other thing that I want to mention is when you hear the term BOCES is Bureau of Cooperative Educational Services. And what that does is it encourages sharing between school districts all over the state. So anytime we can find a dance partner or somebody to pair up with another school district to purchase a service like this, to share a license, what that allows us to do as a school district is generate aid back on the expense of that. And Connor, could you just briefly explain how that works, what our aid rates are, and how that works for refunds for the next year?
Yeah, so we have currently about a $3.3 million BOCES budget. This includes all types of services from BOCES. There are exclusions and types of services that you don't get, but our aid ratio sits around 42%. So we get that back, we spend it this year, and we get it back in the next year for state aid.
Thanks, Connor. So basically anything that we can run through BOCES, we get 42 cents on the dollar refund back in the following year, which is, again, it encourages sharing, and it's a fiscally responsible thing for the school district.
So how is it paid for?
It's through, like we said, in partnership with BOCES. It's paid out of our software budget. Is it paid with taxpayer money? Yes, as is everything. We have local share, we have state aid, and the tax revenue in this community, because of the affluence, is the lion's share. It's the big piece of that pie. So most of our expenses do indeed come out of taxes.
And what percentage of the budget is this?
It's minuscule, less than one, extremely small.
0.0059%.
We use software packages that are quite costly. This is one that is as close to free as they come.
And another question we had was, where can I find this information? Thank you for providing this info session. Will there be a Zoom link? My husband and I prefer not to attend a large indoor gathering in person.
So one thing COVID did for us is that it encouraged a little creativity with these sorts of things. So we're being videotaped. We will stream these things live. We'll post them either through a web link that you'll get through Parent Square or out on our district website after we have these meetings. Some of our community members are unwilling to meet in person, and we understand that. Depending on people's different level of comfort, we'll try to accommodate as many different ways for people to get this information as possible.
And that's all we had submitted.
Okay, so that is the end of the questions that were submitted for us. We have a little bit of time left, so if there are questions from the community, please raise your hand. I'll walk the mic over, and we'll start over here. If you could just please introduce yourself, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kristen. My daughter was in kindergarten last year, so she's going into first grade this year. And I'm just wondering if they have to transport that heavy Chromebook back and forth every day.
I'm sorry.
The Chromebooks.
Yes.
Will they be having them again this year and need to bring them back and forth every day? Or can they just stay in school?
I'll let our principals answer that one.
The Chromebooks are going to stay in school for kindergarten through 5th grade. 6th grade through 12th grade, they're going to bring them back and forth. Unless there's a reason that they need to bring them.
Thank you so much. We also had a very strange Skinny Atlas phenomenon last year where we went from only several hundred devices to over 1,500 devices deployed throughout the district. And like with any school district, there was some fear about how many of those we would actually get back. So Heather, do you remember the exact number that we got back?
You got them all right.
So not only did
Maybe a couple extras.
not only did we get them all back, we got over 30 additional devices returned to us that we did not lend out. So that is a uniquely Skinny Atlas phenomenon right there. Okay, next question.
Is there anything happening with higher sports and math or masks?
So right now, the county executive made no distinctions about high-risk sports other than masks are required. We don't know anything about testing. Kathy Hochul, in her address today, did say that vaccinations were required, masks were required, but she also said that the guidance would be published later this week. I don't know what is going to be in there. If there's going to be any special nuances or anything, we'll communicate that immediately. Thank you.
Oh, hi.
Maybe you could just shout them out so I don't have.
Yeah, so my son's starting kindergarten, and I was just wondering if there's going to be like any kind of, if the parents are allowed to come into the room, any kind of gradual, of getting them used to it.
Absolutely. I'm sure that at some point, you know, we'll start the year and get our routines in place, and then we will absolutely be able to have some parent helpers come in, I'm sure this year, and, you know, open our building up more, certainly more. I think last year, you know, we had so many unknowns. We weren't really sure, and a lot of our communication between teachers and parents was through Zoom. So we're trying to definitely, as Mr. Knuth has said, we're trying to get back to as much normalcy as we possibly can.
Yeah.
So.
I just meant like the first like week type of thing, because my son, we're new to the area, and he didn't go to pre-K because of COVID, so I just wanted to let him know if I could, like, you know, that kind of thing.
I'm sure we can work, and if you want to give me a call, we can work something out too, okay? Always, okay? Thank you so much.
Thanks. Any other questions? Go ahead, Shama.
Okay, a couple. What happens if the school is shut down, or is not shut down, but your child is put in quarantine? Will you provide remote instruction for them?
So the answer to that is yes, and we will work with individual families to figure out what the individual solution will be for your child. It might be live streaming into the classroom, depending on the class, depending on the teacher, depending on the subject and the grade. That may not be the most appropriate option, but we will work with individual families when these things happen to make sure our kids don't get left behind. The thing about quarantines is almost always it's the people that are in the vicinity. If they are put into quarantine, this is through no fault of their own. It could be alphabetically where you sat in a classroom. So we will do everything we can to work on individual solutions for individual kids.
And that's part of my other question. So if they're all wearing masks in the classroom, and that's supposed to mitigate quarantine, that's the purpose of the mask. Everybody in the classroom is quarantined, or is it going to be like just like the people sitting next to the person that had the COVID case? And same with the bus. Is everyone on a bus going to be in quarantine?
No, not everybody will be on quarantine.
How do you decide who is and who is not?
It's within 6 feet of vicinity. It's within certain amounts of time, and it has to do with the vaccination status of the individual. And it also, and I apologize for this because it's confusing and frustrating, and I've been screaming for 2 weeks for this, is that we have 2 different counties with 2 different sets of rules. Everybody has been leaning in the direction of following the CDC guidance, and we're sincerely hopeful that that's what they do, that we get the same rules. But last year they were not the same.
So if you're on a bus for 30 minutes, pretty much that whole bus would be quarantined?
No, likely it would just be the kids within 6 feet of the infected individual.
But what's the time, like, what's the time requirement? Like
1 hour.
1 hour?
Yeah, and that's, again, I'm speaking in terms of Onondaga County only right now. We don't have the Cayuga information in front of us. Last year it was very similar, but even when Onondaga County and Cayuga County went between 14-day quarantines and 10-day quarantines, that didn't even line up right away. So we have been screaming and begging for consistency in how those things are handled. And for the most part, the county health departments have been wonderful to work with, and they're trying their hardest. Cayuga County is smaller, and they have infinitely fewer resources than Onondaga County. So, that plays a factor too.
Yes, you just stated that children's names weren't called over the loudspeaker to come out and get their COVID shots, but middle school teachers and other students are saying otherwise. So someone is not being very honest.
I'll have to look into that more, but my understanding was that we don't do anything to out who is or is not going to get a shot. We did participate with Cayuga County and a vaccination clinic, and I know kids were invited to come down to the vaccination clinic. We also had a second round vaccination clinic where kids actually had to take a bus over to Marcellus, and I think that may be some of the confusion, but I will look into that
It was on the
further.
first day of the clinic. The school was calling over names over the loudspeaker, children's names to come down and get the shot. That's what those school teachers are saying and students have reported.
Okay, I will look into that further, but I will tell you that if there is any truth to that, that should not happen and will not happen.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate your time, and please reach out to your building principals with any additional questions or anything that you think of after the fact. Sincere thanks, and again, school with masks, that's the goal. Let's keep our kids safe, let's keep our kids in person learning. Thanks, everybody.